Hello, my name is Aaron Edwards, co-founder and market consultant of Santos Springs. We offer grain marketing solutions to producers in multiple countries. Welcome to our W2H grain marketing channel. Go ahead and hit the subscribe button. I also recommend tapping the bell so you get future notifications. And if you like what you see, hit the like and share this video with other farmers who care deeply about their grain marketing. If you are a corn or soybean farmer, your revenue depends not only on your production, but also the answer to three simple questions: when, how much, and how you sell. One W, when, two H's, how and how much. Our W2H mentorship provides a clear, concise, and custom approach to answering each one of these three questions for your specific farm throughout the year. Before we start this week's content, it's always important to remember that trading in futures products entails significant risk of loss, which must be understood prior to trading and may not be appropriate for all investors. This commentary and the information contained within should be considered market commentary and reflect the opinions of the author. For those of you watching this with a delay, if you are a U.S. corn or soybean farmer and want to stop being held hostage by market uncertainty, let us teach you how to place each one of your bushels in a grain marketing strategy specifically designed to optimize your farm's revenue. Click on the link and we'll work together to see if our W2H mentorship is the right next step for your grain marketing. My name is Aaron Edwards with Santos Springs. Today is October 14th, 2025. Markets have not been fun. They're heavy and don't really seem to be giving us any type of rally. I'll put it this way, man, I wish I was on a combine or even just a grain buggy. I mean, it's not fun to be stuck in the office looking at bad prices. I sure wish we had positive report, but we're going to make the most of it and go over markets. As always, we want that bias towards action. So let me go ahead and just pull that up and share the screen here. For this week, no action recommended. I'll check that box. I don't think I'm going to get a lot of pushback on this one because it's really hard to sell when basis is bad and futures are weak. But we do want to walk through the analysis on this. We'll talk a little bit about weather in South America. Unfortunately, we don't have updated numbers on the position of the funds, the commitment of traders due to the government shutdown. And it feels like flying blind. And then we'll look at what's going on in Chicago, what's going on in the markets, and go from there. So let me start with South America, just kind of looking, just an overview of the weather down there. The big question this week is kind of how low can it go? So how bearish or bullish should we be? Let me go ahead and share this. So this first image, there we go. This first image, this is the 14-day precipitation analysis. This is past precipitation. So what I want to point out is rainfall. Let me get the marker here. Rainfall is below average for Brazil for this time of year. If you look at the past 14 days, I want to just circle, this is the big powerhouse state of Mato Grosso. That's roughly 1/3 of Brazil's soybean production. Then I'm going to circle regions that are all between about 10 and 15% of production. So one is Rio Grande do Sul, that's that southern tip. They only plant in November. They're not behind. This one is Paraná. We'll go over it in a little bit. I've talked to customers there that are actually done planting. This one is Mato Grosso do Sul, which is right beside Paraguay. Right there is Paraguay. And then here is Goiás. And then these four states up here, that's kind of that northeastern expansion area. Depending on year by year and which projection you go with, that's between 10 and 15% of Brazil's soybean production comes from that expansion region. So those bubbles are not to size, but it kind of gives you an idea of where the soybean country is. And so with that in mind, let's look at the rainfall as you kind of look at that map. And I want to point some things out here. First of all, the first thing that would show up would be this dryness up here, and I'll talk about that when we see their planting progress. But other than that, maybe kind of weak rains over here in eastern Mato Grosso. Everything else though is just really solid rainfall, nothing to expect. And this is the rain, I kind of went through it fast, but that's the rain expected for the 1 to 7 day forecast. So basically this upcoming week, ample rains expected. Then this is our planting progress. You don't need to memorize, you don't need to brush up on your Portuguese reading or memorize any of the states, but I'll highlight some things. In red, I'm gonna put states that are, they're not late because they don't typically plant this early. So Rio Grande do Sul, that's that southern state, way down on the southern tip, but it's too early for them to be planting. Then these are those 4 states in that northeastern expansion region. Also, I mean, historically, it's really early for them to be planting as well. So sure, it's dry, not a huge deal. Maybe 2% replant or something like that on some of their fields, and that's only 10 to 15% of Brazil's production. So the big picture here, I'm even gonna switch this to green. The big picture here is that the middle of the, like the 80% of the country that is really planting and does have rain forecasted, it's all as well in that part of the country. So will rains continue? I mean, you still have to grow a crop, right? But the Mato Grosso, that's the powerhouse state. They're at almost 30% planted. And then you have, several other important states making good progress. Well, I should say that, I should rephrase that. That's the historic average, okay? So they are at 20% planted. The historic average is 29, so they're a little bit behind on planting. Do you plant before or after the rains is kind of the question. I think a lot of that planting will get caught up by next week because they'll be looking at that forecasted rain and they'll be running a lot this week. First part of this week's dry, so I think a lot is being planted. I'm not overly concerned about these delays. You can see they're behind 9. So Mato Grosso is, rounded numbers, 11 percentage points behind. Mato Grosso do Sul is 9 percentage points behind. Goiás is 11 percentage points behind. Minas is on pace, basically. And then here, 14 percentage points behind. Paraná's a little bit ahead. And then Santa Catarina is 8 percentage points behind. I'm not too concerned with those delays because my opinion is a lot of those will be erased by next week's report. When Monday, they publish the Monday report, they got caught up on planting and then they got that Goldilocks rain, all is fine. That's what I expect to see. So I'm not overly concerned. I don't think the market's overly concerned. The caveat to that would be 2 things. They plant, then the forecasted rains do not materialize. Then you might have a story where, oh my goodness, they planted in the dust, rain was forecasted, it didn't get here, will that replant? The other thing is if they don't get enough planted, I'm really looking for kind of that 30% planted mark by the end of October because that allows them to have a good shot at double crop corn. So let's say that they don't get a lot planted this week, and then the rains turn on and don't shut off, so they can't get back in the field until November. And then all of a sudden, we're talking about reduced corn acreage in Brazil. So there could be a bullish story. Markets are expecting, and I kind of agree with them on this, that probably Brazil will do a great job kind of planting in the dust. If these forecasted rains get there, that's probably enough for them to raise a decent double crop corn crop. So that's bearish beans because they did a good job planting, and corn because they planted it early enough to raise double crop. And then the rest of the bean crop, if it's a little bit earlier or a little bit later, that might affect delivery on the other side, but it probably doesn't affect yield or acreage very much. So it's just some fine tuning on when that grain is available and how basis fluctuates, but it's kind of out of the woods. Now, if this week either they don't get planted, then rains turn on and they can't get planted, that could be a bullish story. Or, they plant and then the rains don't get here and then they have to replant. That could be potentially a bullish story as well. We'll keep an eye on it. My hunch is, we'll put it this way. My customers down there, it's just radio silence because I know everyone's in the field, kind of like everyone's in the field here in the US as well. And I just think they're probably getting a lot of work done this week. Which brings us to kind of our philosophy of doing work, market plan portfolio, make sure we have the right grain in the right buckets. Based on that, seasonals, the position of the funds, which it's really bugging me that we're flying blind and we don't know what the big money is doing. But we got the government shutdown, and what are we going to do about that? And then technicals, based on your portfolio, then these indicators that we look at, that gives us our action. And again, I don't think I'm going to have to twist arms very much to say that I'm not too excited about taking action in this environment. But let's look at the markets. I want to start with the soybean market. Let me get, I think a black marker would be good here. There we go, black. Pull this down to the bottom. So this is the January contract for Chicago Board of Trade soybeans. Maybe we should still be looking at November, but we only have a couple of weeks left on that November before it kind of starts losing liquidity so my kind of bigger picture trends, I'm already looking at the January. And just for the sake of kind of a conversation or perspective, I want to draw a couple lines here. Kind of want to break this trading range into thirds. Oh, got a little bit out for there. Let's see if it'll fix. Okay. Let's do the top end at 1080. Going to be kind of rounded numbers. And then let's do the bottom here at 980. And then if we break that into thirds, we're going to be, again, approximate values, right? And then roughly there. Okay. So this roughly has the soybean market broken into thirds, kind of in those ranges. And I just wanted to point out a couple of things that I think are very interesting. Number one, whenever we get into the bottom third of this market, buyers have been very, very willing. That's not to say we can't get there again. But every time that we've fallen really too much, 10.10 or below, buyers are like, beans are cheap enough, I'm buying. Will this time be different? Maybe. I mean, who knows? This market can absolutely plummet. Yeah, sure, that's fine. Anything's possible. But for over a year, any time that we got close to that $10 mark, buyers just said, beans are on sale, give me some. So we haven't spent very much time in that lower third. And this is also where seasonality plays a role. It's important to realize, if you turn on any headline at all across the board, it could not be more bleak for soybeans. It's harvest. I just talked about forecasted rain in Brazil. Yeah, they're a little bit behind on planting, but they're probably going to get caught up this week. Record acreage. Argentina, cut in line and exported 3 times more soybeans than they typically do. Demand for U.S. soybeans is very, very weak. Basis is not helping us out. You could not paint a more bleak picture for soybeans. And even in the midst of all that, we're still not in the bottom third of the trading range. That for me, and I don't want to just be, blindly optimistic, but I think it's noteworthy. At least it's noteworthy. On the upper side of the range, and I've recommended sales. I'll even change the color here. The sales I've recommended have really been in the upper third of this market, but it's tough to be too optimistic. You're selling in here. That's kind of as good as you could have had with the market, but it's still not a very good price. It's still not very exciting. What should I really be doing about this? And the question is, where is this market going? And I just think it's important to realize soybeans are heavy, but they are in the middle of third of their trading range. And for now, there's not evidence that they're going to break out of that middle third of the trading range. And if they do, anything under 10.10 on that January contract has really been more of a buy than anything else. So again, I'm not necessarily bullish, but I just think the perspective on the soybean market is important, because if we don't have perspective, if we take all of these lines out, it feels like, okay, this 20-day mover is going to come down. It's going to pressure markets. Soybeans are going to bleed out and they're never going to turn around. That's what emotionally this market feels like. Could that happen? It could, but I just think this is a boring range-bound trade market that's very likely at some point in time going to find some fragment of bullishness and at least take us back up to the upper end of the range. And even if we ping pong back and forth between, say, 1020 and 1060, it's boring, but it's not. If we have a range, we can live with it. We can learn how to deal with it. And then shifting gears to corn, over here on the corn, it's a little bit interesting because we've had some bigger extremes. My caution with the corn, or what I really like to know about the corn, is let me read you that line. So here's the bottom of it. Here's the top of it. Where is this selling pressure coming from? Just this recent selling pressure. What is pushing corn down? Because here's my thoughts on that, and this makes a very big difference. Are farmers selling corn at harvest because they need cash? Sure, it's a loss. Sure, they hate the price. They need the cash. Nobody told them they could write a basis contract and get cash. And they're just dumping corn, throw your hands up in the air and, I just got to dump it. Is this farmer selling? Because if farmers are selling that, what are speculators doing? Are they saying, okay, nobody's watching, farmers are selling, prices are going down, let me scoop this up here kind of while nobody's watching, and let me go from a short position to a neutral position. I've been bearish corn for so long. This is my opportunity to get out of those without adding pressure, to the market. I really want to get long, and I'm farmers are selling, so I'm scooping it up cheaper, and I'm happy with it. Or are farmers saying, I'm not selling this, but speculators are saying, let's really push this thing down. Who's selling it? And I really wish I knew that. I wish we could go back and really, if we look at 2 weeks, we'd kind of be looking at this whole move here. I wish I knew, are speculators selling? Is this selling pressure coming from farmers or from speculators? But we don't have that, so we can hope the government gets up and running. Hopefully they'll, announce a deal for the farmers, send you a check, and start giving us COT reports, and all will be well. Knock on wood. Obviously, not trusting in governments to make all things well. But that's one big question that I have. A lot of the same, though. It's harvest. Are we marching back to harvest lows? I think there's a chance we come back down to the August lows, but I don't really know that we go much below that. I'd kind of be surprised if we go much below that. So if the worst that it's going to get, let me see if I can draw a marker. If these harvest lows, maybe it goes a little higher, a little bit lower, we've got a little work to do, but what, maybe 15 cents down? And then we find those August lows. Simply stated, I don't really expect that the bottom is going to fall out of the corn or soybean market. I don't really expect that we're going to go to new levels of lows, at least not significant ones. Now, maybe these markets are going to bleed out and we're going to go test some of those August lows, but I'm not overly pessimistic that the market's just gonna really do a number here and pressure down to new lows, like significant new lows or a change of price level. I think it's just something we have to kind of survive, harvest, and kick the can down the road. Make sure you have enough cash coming in the door to keep the lights on, keep upside exposure on the futures market, and wait for a sales opportunity. So let's just wrap it up with a quick summary. Seasonal, the corn is a buy. Seasonally, soybeans are also a buy. Managed money, we don't know. You've heard enough of my complaining on that, but that's a big old question mark. It's giving me grief there, but we don't know the managed money. The trend is down for corn, and the trend is down for soybeans. Looking at basis levels really have not changed much. In the Eastern Corn Belt, they're similar to historic averages. But in the Western Corn Belt, they are well below historic averages for this time of year. The corn and soybean markets are in downtrends and pressured today. They could test the August lows. But in my opinion, there is not evidence at this time that they will take out the August lows and continue to fall. Enjoy harvest, figure out if you have, fill the bins. If you have overrun bushels, figure out a way to keep, get yourself cash and keep upside in the markets. And hopefully, markets turn around. They always do. I'm not saying we're going to have fantastic opportunities, but I don't think we need to be, hurrying up to sell at the second lowest price since August. So hope you have a great rest of your day, great rest of your week. Be safe out there. Hope you can wrap up harvest well and get it all squared away.